Good morning, third graders. I hope that you all had a really great weekend and that you stayed dry because there was a lot of rain this weekend. And I also hope that you're ready for our next 2 chapters of Rump by Liesl Shurtliff. Let's do a little bit of backtracking. What happened in the last chapter? Chapter 25 is called Warnings from Red, but what was the last chapter called? Where there's a will, there's no way. So I remember that Rump tried to help Liesl moving the pixie nest and it didn't work out too well. And so now he's taken off. But we'll see what happens next. Chapter 25, Warnings from Red. In a week, the world was white with the first snow. My aunts huddled in the wool room near the fire with their work. I didn't want to be around any of that, so I took a walk to the village. Gnomes waddled around with their tongues out, trying to catch snowflakes. That reminded me painfully of Red. I scooped up a girl gnome with pigtails and a pudgy nose. This message is for Red on the mountain. Message for Red in the mountain, she squealed. I hadn't gotten a message from Red since I came to live with my aunts. I was a little worried. Was she all right? I wanted to talk to her, but with the gnome wriggling in my arms, I didn't know what to say. Dear Red, I'm living with my 3 aunts who are witches. My real name is Rump, and it means I'm trapped in magic forever, and no one can help me. Opal is having a baby, and I might have to take it. I just didn't think that message would inspire Red to respond. Mostly, I wanted to send her something so she would send something back. Dear Red, I'm in yonder now. It's not so cold here, and guess what? I have 3 aunts. Guess what else? I grew. Maybe I'm taller than you now. Also, they call me Robert here, so it's probably better if you do too. Your friend, Robert. The gnome scurried down the road until she was just a speck in all the white. After that, I walked to the village every day, even though it would be at least a week before a gnome came back with a message. It took 16 days. The gnome was so frozen I had to take him home and thaw him in front of the fire before he could say anything to me. I was delighted at first, but then Red's message wasn't so cheerful. Dear Robert, Lord Greedy Fatty Miller Oswald is withholding more rations because we're finding even less gold. I think the king has found Opal out. Don't worry, I won't say a thing about you-know-what. Obviously, Opal can't make gold out of straw, but the king can't kill her because, And so the king has turned his wrath on the mountain, demanding more gold. But there is no more gold, so everyone is really hungry and grumpy. Red. P.S. You might be taller than me, but I can still pound you. What a good friend. So King Barf was punishing the mountain, through Lord Oswald. How he must have raged when he discovered Opal couldn't really spin the gold. Maybe she told the king about me to spare herself. Maybe soldiers were ready. Maybe soldiers were already searching for me. No, that couldn't be. It had been too long. Opal and the miller were probably afraid to tell the king that they had deceived him. They must have come up with an explanation for why she couldn't spin the straw into gold anymore. Like expecting a baby takes away her magical powers. Yes, I could believe that, but I wasn't too confident that Opal would think to say it. Poor Red. She sounded so miserable. Maybe I could cheer her up with a rhyme, but the gnome who brought Red's message ran away fast as he could, for my message. I guess even gnomes have their limits. I found another in the village and sent Red a poem. I know a miller, greedy and fat, smells like a troll, looks like a rat. He steals all the gold and creeps like a cat. But one day the mountain fell down on him splat. I waited 7 days and then went to the village every day to search for the gnome from Red. 16 days, 17, 18. I told myself it was because of the snow and ice. Maybe the gnomes refused to take any more messages such long distances. 20 days, 25 days, 34 days. It took 34 days to get a reply, and her message was even less cheerful than the last. She didn't say anything about my poem. Dear Robert, the miller has been asking me about you. He asked if I knew where you were or if I'd heard from you. I wanted to punch his nosy nose, but I couldn't do that. So later I punched Frederick for no good reason. Well, he's Frederick, so that's a reason. Don't send a note back. I think the miller is starting to sniff with his oversized nose. Your friend, Red. P.S. As always, Granny says, watch your step. The miller was asking about me? I tried to swallow the hard lump that had risen in my throat. He couldn't possibly find me here, could he? I was far away in yonder, tucked in a little wood with 3 witches who were my aunts. I was safe, wasn't I? But what if the miller could find me? I didn't want to believe it was possible, but if he could, I feared what he would do. He could hurt my aunts, or use them just as he'd used me. Staying with them this long has been selfish on my part. I had been putting them in danger, and they deserved nothing but kindness from me. I should probably leave now. So I thought Rump had already tried taking off, but apparently he hadn't. He was planning on staying with his aunts for a while longer. Let's read chapter 26 too, since that one was so short. Okay, so chapter 26 is called Destiny Calls. I was not safe, and neither was anyone who cared about me. I tried to brush off the feeling, especially when I sat with my aunts in the warmth of their home, eating their good food and watching their magical spinning and knitting and weaving. But it was no use. The more I tried to tell myself not to worry, the more I worried and knew that I had to leave. I left my aunts on a frigid morning without so much as a goodbye. I couldn't risk them knowing where I was headed, and I didn't think I could bear the looks on their faces, especially Ida. I would miss her most. I would miss our rhymes. I made up a farewell rhyme as I walked away. Home is a place with 3 dear aunts. They cook good food and sew nice pants. They spin and knit and weave and mend. Goodbye for now, my 3 dear friends. I walked through the forest while it was still dark. My satchel weighed down on my shoulder, heavy with food I had stolen from my aunts. My stomach was heavy with guilt. The frozen snow crunched beneath my feet. I had decided I would go to the mountains beyond. It was the farthest place from the kingdom that I knew of. I could live all alone in a mountain cave far away from anyone, and herd goats and live off their milk and whatever the land would give me. I had considering going back to the trolls, thinking they might be able to protect me from my own magic, but I wasn't too fond of the idea of eating sludge for the rest of my life. My stomach wriggled at the thought. Besides, they were too close to the kingdom, and I knew they got news of weddings and babies. The risk was too great. I emerged from the trees and was on the road before dawn. The air was bitter cold, and I wrapped myself tighter inside the thick coat my aunts had made me. Soon, I'd left the village behind. Before long, I heard muffled voices in the distance. It was still dark, but I could just make out the shadowy movements of something farther up the road. I veered off into the trees. It might just be a farmer bringing wool to the village, or a peddler coming to trade his trinkets and treasures, but I didn't want anyone to see me. As they drew nearer, their voices became clear. I don't think this is right, says a boy's voice. It was irritatingly familiar. Uh-oh. The woman said he came this way, said another voice, also familiar. But she didn't see the gnome. We're supposed to be following the gnome. If you hadn't lost it, it's impossible to keep up with the gnome, you idiot. And anyway, it doesn't matter. We're on his trail. When I find that butt, I'm going to punch him so hard he sees pixies. You punch like a girl, Frederick. Quiet. If we don't find him, Father's going to make us go back to the mountain and work in the mines. Do you want that? No. A chill ran down my spine. That had nothing to do with the freezing air. My heart began to thump in my chest. Frederick and Bruno were standing just feet away from me. I shifted nervously, and a dead twig snapped beneath my foot. Shh! Did you hear that? Probably a rabbit. I held very still. Frederick moved in my direction. If he came any closer, I would need to run. I stepped back, bracing myself. This is where I would like to really complain about the Witch of the Woods' advice. You see, if you're going to give someone advice, it's important to be specific. Watch your step is not specific at all. You take lots of steps every day, so it would be really helpful to know which step to be careful on. Watch your step when you're around poop or a trap. Watch your step when you're near a tower window or a pixie nest. I stepped on a pixie nest. I think my Aunt Hadel's advice also was lacking. Waking one pixie from its winter sleep is foolish. Waking a nest full of pixies is a death wish. A piercing shriek exploded from the ground and filled the air, so that it must have reached every ear within a mile. Pixies shot out and pelted towards me like 1,000 tiny arrows, pink and blue and red and orange sparks, their teeth bared for war. I screamed like a mountain lion and fell to the ground and rolled, throwing mud and dirt all over, but those pixies bit my nose, my cheeks, my ears, and all 10 of my fingers. They bit clear through my clothes, on my arms and legs. 3 went up my pants and bit me right on my namesake. Finally, the pixies flew away through the trees, either satisfied that they had punished me enough or tired of the dirt. I could feel all parts of my body beginning to swell. My bottom expanded beneath me. My legs felt like fat logs, floating on water, just bobbing around without any control. My face puffed up, making my skin stretch and tighten. Although my eyes were swollen, nearly shut, I could see enough to know that Frederick and Bruno were standing over me. They wore soldiers' uniforms and both pointed big hunting knives right at my face. "Hello, Butt," said Frederick. "Fancy a stroll?" "No, thank you. I'm rather busy," is what I meant to say, but that's not what came out of my swollen lips. It was more like, "No, thank you. I should busy," and drool ran down my face. Frederick laughed. "I didn't think you could get any uglier. Tie him up." Bruno knelt down, grabbed my puffy hands and to tie them together. He had a time of it, though. My hands were so fat, it was almost impossible to get my wrists together. Finally, he tied me at the elbows, which was probably the only place the pixies didn't bite. "We've missed you so much, Bud," said Frederick, and he patted my swollen face. I winced. Bruno laughed. "Father misses you too, and so does our sister, the Queen." I was afraid they were going to tell me she had a baby, but they didn't. I breathed. As long as she didn't have a baby, or I didn't hear of it, there was a way out of this. Of course, the miller wanted me to spin gold for him, but I didn't have to. I wouldn't. Not for anything. They dragged me out of the trees, and they marched me down the road in the direction I had already been traveling, but definitely not where I wanted to go. I knew this was a very serious problem. Frederick and Bruno were kidnapping me at knife point. I should have been terrified, but I couldn't think of any of that because I was seething mad at the swarm of pixies and at Red's granny for her vague advice. I had sausage fingers. I could barely see. I was drooling out of fat lips, and my butt was lopsided. It was very awkward to walk with a lopsided bottom. As I waddled down the road, my heart swelled too, with sadness. I could say that none of it mattered, that I should just give up and let the tangles keep wrapping until they covered the top of my head and pushed me down into the earth. What did it matter that Frederick and Bruno had captured me? What did it matter they were taking me to the miller who wanted me to spin him gold forever? But it mattered in my heart. I didn't want to be trapped. I wanted to grow. I wanted to break free. When the sun set, we stopped to camp, and I was tied to a tree near the road. I was actually grateful to sit on snow and ice. I soothed my sore, sorry rump, but I was also starving. And I watched hungrily as Frederick and Bruno tore through my satchel and ate all the food I had packed. They threw me a chunk of bread, which I had to bend down and eat in the dirt like a dog. Frederick commanded Bruno to guard me. When they were together, Bruno did whatever his brother told him. But by himself, he was meaner than Frederick. Maybe he was only mean to me because other people made him feel small, and he wanted to prove that he was big. I suddenly felt sorry for Bruno. In a way, I never had, and Frederick too, because he probably felt small around the miller, and the miller probably felt smaller on someone else, like King Barf. But I didn't feel too sorry. Bruno might feel smaller than even me, but I didn't think meanness was ever anyone's destiny. Meanness was a choice. At first, we sat in silence, but then Bruno grew bored. He laughed and poked my swollen face. "They made a good breakfast of you, didn't they?" He laughed and laughed until he fell in the snow and sputtered at the cold shock. As darkness fell, it grew very cold. I sat shivering against a tree while Frederick wrapped himself in a thick woolen blanket. Bruno tried to do the same, but Frederick yanked his blanket away, saying, "Keep watching, but," he commanded. "He's tied up tight enough," whined Bruno. I said, "Watch him." Bruno faced me and glowered, but as soon as Frederick was asleep, he wrapped himself in a blanket and curled up by the fire. "Good night, Bud," Bruno whispered loudly, and then joined his brother in the snoring slumber. I waited and shivered. Everything was quiet. The fire was dead, and there was only a sliver of moonlight to see by. It was impossible to sleep because I was so cold and swollen with pixie bites. So I stayed awake thinking about my destiny, and when I got tired of that, I cursed pixies and gnomes, but mostly pixies. But then a miracle happened. During the night, my swelling started to go down, helped by the cold air, I guess, and as it went down, my bindings loosened. I wriggled, but it wasn't quite enough for me to get free. I deflated a little more every hour, and I wriggled and wriggled as Frederick and Bruno snored on. Just as the sky was fading from black to purple, my hands and arms were almost back to normal, and they slipped out of the ropes. I praised the pixies. I wish they had bitten me 100 more times and made me fat as the miller. Beautiful, lovely pixies. It's funny how some things you think are so terrible can turn out to be really wonderful. I loved my swollen arms and fingers and my lopsided butt. Something rustled in the bushes, probably just a squirrel or a rabbit, but it made Bruno stop snoring. He smacked his lips and pulled his covers tighter around him. I moved as fast and quietly as I could. With my arms free, I was able to wriggle myself out of the rest of the ropes. Just as I pulled the last rope over my head, the rustling noise came again, and from the shrubs appeared a gnome. He was hopping with great excitement. Greetings from the kingdom. King Barfahue, Archibaldi, Rillinaldi, Fief, and Queen Opal both happily announced the birth of their new son, heir to the throne of the kingdom. His name is... I clamped my hand over the gnome's mouth. But it was too late. I heard exactly what I didn't want to hear, and Frederick and Bruno were awake now, staring bleary-eyed between the gnome and me. I dropped the gnome, scrambled to my feet, and ran, except I ran in exactly the opposite direction from where I wished to go. I had freed myself from Frederick and Bruno's ropes, but the ropes that had been tangled and knotted inside me were now tugging at me, pulling me like a stubborn donkey in the direction of the kingdom. It was time to collect the worst bargain ever. So Rump doesn't have any choice. He feels like he's being pulled towards the kingdom because Opal's baby was born. Now remember, in the real story of Rumpelstiltskin, or the classic fairy tale, Rumpelstiltskin makes the princess promise him her firstborn child. But in this book, Opal was not really thinking when she made that bargain, and so she was actually the one who said, "Hey, yep, you can have my firstborn child." And now Rump is driven by magic, and he has to take the child. So we'll see what happens tomorrow. In chapter 27 of Rump. Have a great day, everyone. Get outside. It's not raining today, and it's warm, so I hope that you all get outside, and I will talk to you guys tomorrow. Bye.